Hello, and welcome to the Conscious Communion podcast, where we traverse through the inner dwellings of the human experience through conversation. I'm your host, Danae. Join me as we explore the interconnection of creativity and community. Zac Phillips is a men's mentor, musician, ceremonialist, and student of energy. Through Zac's journey, he's unveiled a call to aid men in their own personal attunement. This often guides Zac's clients to take action to create a life that expresses their full potential and purpose. Imagining a world where men have integrated both the feminine and masculine, Zac supports men as they release old stories and aids in their active collaboration of creating new narratives and rituals. Zac embodies this work by facilitating groups, ceremony, and one-on-one mentorships. His vision is that the men he works with can show up more fully in service to their loved ones, families, and communities. I met Zac through the wonderful world of social media, and here we are today. I'm so grateful to be here with you. Welcome, Zac.
Thanks for having me, Danae.
Of course. Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being on the journey that you're on to then share this work with others.
Wouldn't have it any other way.
So sweet. I feel like a good conversation to just kind of get things started, just get in the thick of it, is what was the catalyst to this work? How did you really find your precipice to working with men and doing the work that you're doing today?
Yeah, I mean, it all started really in 2020 was a wild year for a lot of us. And in addition to, the lockdown happening, I lost my job, and then I found out that my father was deathly sick. Pulmonary fibrosis is a lung disease, and he ended up passing away in late September. And I was just having one of those dark nights of the soul, and it was showing in a lot of different areas of my life and my relationships. The same old pattern was happening. I was estranged from my grandfather and trying to work out my relationship with my dad, and just dealing with a lot of grief and emotion, and not quite knowing what to do with that. And I heard through the grapevine that there was this thing where these men were meeting up in groups, and my relationship with men previously had been okay, there's not a lot to talk about. I tended to be more emotional, and it's okay, I'm not really into going out to bars or drinking or talking about sports. And my mindset was this is what men do together. And so it really took diving into these groups and learning what it's about, and also just putting in the work to be vulnerable and see other men that were really trying to better themselves and be there for their families or their loved ones. And that was really healing and inspirational for me, and really directed where I am today.
That's beautiful. And yeah, absolutely a massive rite of passage to go through. Grief is an initiation that we'll all go through at some point in time in our lives. And yet how we navigate that initiation is really unique, right? Really unique.
Absolutely.
And to be able to use something that sounds like it was a rock and a hard place to then really shake it up, find your purpose in the midst of it, is a really beautiful testament to the power of what love can do. Because ultimately you're showing up for yourself, and you
100%.
were showing up for yourself with self-love, which I think is huge for when we do this work, when we show up for others, right?
Yeah, and absolutely. And I think my father passing really put a just like time limit on things, or an awareness on the importance of doing, changing the pattern. And there's this Irish proverb that's like, we have two lives, and the second one begins when we realize we only have one.
Mm.
And yeah, there's this sense of like uh just going through that experience. I mean, before I was pretty atheist and really sort of like logical and scientific, and I didn't have the relationship with spirit that I do now. And just the experience that I went through with my dad, and some of the things that we talked about during his transition time, I was fortunate enough to be able to fly into Kansas City where he was, stay with my parents, like cook him food, and really be next to him during that whole process. And also my family ended up doing the whole ritual, the burial ritual ourselves, which was this very beautiful and improvisational ceremony. But it was a hugely transformative period for me. Just talking to my dad, he couldn't even talk at times because he was hooked up to a respirator, but he wrote down on the whiteboard. We were discussing, what happens to the soul once we pass on. And he wrote down on the whiteboard, "I become a part of the unified field, and I'm everywhere you are." And so this was like, dealing with the aftermath of all this like crazy feelings of grief, that has been a real beacon of, like, okay, I didn't realize that my relationship with my dad, like death is the beginning to a new chapter of a relationship with him, because it really gave me empirical evidence of spiritual connection to him. Because there's that feeling that many of us have where, we're like thinking about a friend, and then they all of a sudden, a few moments later, they're giving us a call or text. And I had that same experience with my dad, where when I was reaching out there into the void, like that there was something out there that was reaching back. And that really started my relationship in terms of exploring tarot cards, and just like, what is my personal relationship with spirit. So
Thank you so much for sharing all of that. It's really, really beautiful. And yet I realize that there were so many hard places in the midst of that experience for you. And so I empathize with the grief and the deep solace that you must have felt. And I know that you still miss him. How could you not?
absolutely.
Even still, you get to have this new beautiful relationship that you have co-created with him. And so that in itself is so divine. And the ceremony piece, I would love to just touch on that, because you now work with people to create new rituals and to find out what ritual means for them, more importantly, because it is so unique for each of us, right? How we experience and navigate ritual and how we open ourselves up to ritual. So I'm so curious if you would just share a little bit about what that experience was like for you. You shared, that you were open to tarot cards, and really, like, I think that in itself can become a ritual for so many of us when we meet ourselves in spirit and come to the altar with something that will interact with us. So I would love to just share what that process was like for you to search and find the rituals that make sense for you.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it really started, there was a mentor that I was working with, Dave Brave Love, and he basically suggested, like, why not get in touch with this intuition of yours? Like, it seems like it's strong, it's like a natural talent, but what if you leaned into that and explored what that meant. So honestly, it started with like when I was going out to eat and I would look at the menu and it's like, what, like, becoming aware of like what is that surge of energy where my body is like, yeah, let's go, and dialing that in. And so I guess it took a couple different things. It took the structure of sort of like creating some discipline and some repetition around it, because I mean, tarot, and now I've also studied runes. Like they're whole, it's a whole belief system that can take years and years and years to really master. And, but really for me, the real magic happened when I started realizing that what was possible is having a direct relationship with spirit. And really, I'd say gratitude practice was a big piece of that, in terms of waking up every day and just thinking of 5 things that I'm thankful for. And even the small rituals. See, I think sometimes when we think of ritual, it's like this grand thing in our heads, and like this like big to do and festival kind of thing, but it doesn't have to be that way. I think there's a huge portion of our lives that we live unconsciously, sort of through habit. And basically, in my view, ritual just means bringing some intention into those habits that you're doing. So it's like, okay, I have a cup of tea, so let's, like, say thank you for being able to have this tea, which was like flown across the sea to be able to and I flip on a switch on this device that boils the water. It's just like there's so many things that I feel like we can be grateful for if we slow down our awareness enough to be able to do that. So it's like even those tough moments, like my father passing away, like the silver lining to that is that I formed this relationship with spirit. And honestly, I feel like my relationship with him is like better than ever. Like I write letters to him on his birthday, and also music. He's a musician, and thinking about his legacy and how I'm passing on, his gifts. I realized that so many things can actually be sacred if we just tune in our awareness to bringing that intention into it.
Yes, the intention piece is huge. It's everything. I think bringing intentionality into everything we do changes the game. Even how we shower, right? I know that sounds so silly, but if we're like actually enjoying how the water feels on our skin, like that in itself can become ritual.
100%.
That in itself is sacred. We have clean water that we get to shower with. Not everyone has access to that. And it's really, like you said, I loved that you said this, but slowing down to really recognize what we have to be grateful for, because there's so much. There's so much that we have to be grateful for.
100%.
And I think our society for a long time has placed into consciousness that because life is hard. And so that tends to be what we focus on versus the latter, which is all that we have to be grateful for. So when we get to change that script and rewrite the new paradigm that we want to operate in, which is one that breeds gratitude and love and respect for our lives, then we'll come into much more fruition with the living, breathing essence of all that we are.
Absolutely. Well, and part of it for me too is like, so both of my grandfathers were Baptist ministers, and they ended up leaving the church, so I didn't get directly they both ended up separately, doing that. But so I didn't get the direct dogma and stuff like that. However, the grid of shame and the belief of I need to suffer to have worth. There's ways that I feel like even if you are not in a religious situation that isn't healthy, that there are ways societally that these things are coded into how we behave and also like what our relationship with spirit is. Because I mean, I get people, doing tarot card stuff on social media. You'll get people just like randomly DMing you, asking you if you're like a devil worshiper. And it's like, and I'm just trying to help, really. But it's yeah, there's a lot of that out there. So.
There is, and I think that it's like I would venture to say that people that go there are looking for that. Like they're looking to find, rather than just respecting people for finding their own path, which is really what we should be doing, is if we just worried about ourselves and not even worried, if we just continued to be intentional with what is coming in through us and how we're navigating life, we'd be much better off. And I love to hear that you came from a family of 2 Baptist ministers, not just one, but 2. But the dogmatic approach that can come from systemic organizations, specifically religions, that in itself is such a hard thing to unlearn from your family's DNA. Like that stuff is programmed into our makeup,
Absolutely. Yeah, I have realized recently through some energy healing sessions that it's actually not even my stuff. Like from my experience, it's me experiencing it through my grandfather, and like, so I am like, it's not even mine. However, this is somebody who I grew up a mile away from, and he was really like a second father figure. So really interestingly, I've had just 2 different separate archetypes for what a father figure even is. On the one hand, there's my grandfather, who is very like entrepreneur, sort of like this archetype of macho and like, I'm the center of the room and commanding and charismatic and like super in shape. And then my dad, who is more sensitive and artistic and like wasn't always great about speaking up for his needs. And I think right now there is this real need for men to be able to incorporate sort of like the best parts of both of those different archetypes of being able to have direction and have this presence and have this ability for action, and being able to like soften into your feelings and vulnerability and like take genuine care for the people who are around you. So
yeah, it's amazing how, and that in itself, even when you were sharing that, just the 2 different archetypes, right? Like that to me sounds like the masculine and the feminine. There's this huge reclamation that we get to embark upon when we're trying to balance both archetypes within ourselves. I lived most of my life in my masculine until I started doing some work and was able to reclaim my feminine. And so it's been this really interesting integration, because it has taken so much time for me to not feel like I have to control. And I think that that's this like systemic program that we all have so deeply ingrained in us, because, well, capitalism, colonialism, like there's so many things, and it's like interwoven into our systems.
100%.
And so I'm curious, I know you're doing this work. How have you been able to embark on this path for yourself to reclaim both your masculine and your feminine, because it's the reclamation of a healthy masculine, right? Like there's been that, and then there's also the finding the feminine and marrying the two. So how have you done that for yourself to then now share it with others?
I mean, it's been a practice and it's been a journey, but I think really, to me, it comes down to being able to be fully expressed. Because I think with masculine and feminine, with this polarity things, I think sometimes we can, because of what the words masculine and feminine mean, we can kind of get ourselves, well, like for personally speaking, like I had a hard time with that because I've been told a lot of my life that I'm like too feminine or not masculine enough, because I've always had that like vibrant self-expression piece and like funny, sense of humor. Like, so that lover archetype has always been like a strong one within me. But I think where my growth has been is actually leaning more into that warrior side and creating structure and consistency for myself. So I think it's really like different people need different things. And the thing is about, I do think your experience is a common one in terms of like women feeling like, okay, society is like pushing everybody into their masculine and like conquer and like, let's be, this equality thing I'm all for, but it's also like had some weird consequences that aren't so healthy, I think, also. And just like, I believe that you can have a strong masculine side regardless of how you identify gender wise, like men, women, non-binary, whatever. Like you have two poles of energy inside of you, and there's a masculine just means this sense of like presence, and that presence creates safety for that feminine side, and that presence and that direction creates safety and allows the feminine to be fully expressed and fully open and fully receptive, like the feminine part of ourselves wants to. So I think, we just can get ourselves tripped up in that masculine and feminine thing when it's really, to me, the whole reason we learn about archetypes, and this is true for like tarot or what have you as well, but the whole reason we study archetypes is so that we can fully embody the particular one that we need in that moment that it calls for. Because there's some moments when we need to be like, you know what, fuck off, this is my boundary, no, no, period. And then there's other times when, like you need to have that openness, and a lot of men struggle with this, but just needing to be open and vulnerable and expressive with how you really feel.
So beautifully said. Yes. I loved how you explained that. It's so funny because when I was coming into my feminine, I was like, I'm done with the masculine. Like, I'm done. And it's like, you can't be done. Like, this is not. And I realized that so quickly because then I don't know. It just, the imbalance created so much stagnancy that there was the reciprocation of those two energies are needed for us to live in our sovereign highest self. Like that's part of it. And so when we get to reclaim, but also not reshape, but really come to terms with the shadows of those archetypes and accept the shadows of those archetypes, that's when we really get to meet ourselves so deeply. And then that's the permission to then just find more ease in the midst of balancing both polarities, right?
100%. Yeah, I do feel like right now we're at a point where this relationship with the feminine it has to change. There are so many signs to me that our relationship, men or women, with the divine feminine, with Mother Earth or Pachamama, whatever you want to call, has been damaged, and there needs to be some healing. I mean, there's all this. It manifests itself in sexual violence, extraction, this genocide that's happening. There's just so many signs to me that there needs to be a shift in how we relate to the divine feminine, and healing that feminine inside of ourselves is the place to start.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. It really is just this severed relationship that I think so many of us do have with, like you said, the divine feminine. For me, I am called to the earth. That is just like where I find my most innate presence with myself and my highest self.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I've learned where those severed ties come from for me. And so many of them are ancestral for so many of us. It's not like just one or two of us. It's like, no, talk about ritual. We've lost ritual because we've lost track of what our ancestors practiced.
Mm-hmm.
If we were to go back, and so much of that is, I mean, we could go on to a whole topic of that, but that's just now for those of us who are doing this work, who are looking to call back these roots, right? To create compost for what's been here, but then to also grow the roots that have been really fruitful for so many of our ancestors. Like, let's grow something new, but from old things, if that makes sense, like,
yeah,
let's
totally.
use the stuff.
I think a common pattern that I've seen for people who are just starting out in the work is like, I'm going to be the one to break all the ancestral change, and I'm going to be the hero of my bloodline. And I love the enthusiasm, and I think that for my personal experience, I've found taking a humble approach and forgiving and being like, realizing that our ancestors and our parents and our weird relatives are just doing the best with the tools that they have, and they are dealing with their own story that is affecting how they're able to show up. So it's that feeling that you're having is important. It's because it's a projection of what you see in yourself that needs healing.
Oh, thank you for saying that. It's so, and you're speaking to a past version of myself where I was just like really angry. I mean, I think most of us kind of go through that season.
Yeah.
I think it's important for us to feel the anger 1,000%. And also, just like you said, our families did the best that they could with the tools that they had. There was so much anger that I had for my parents, just like why didn't you do this, or why, and that only got me so far. It's the forgiveness piece that really allows us to get into the depths of finding ourselves and the truth of all that we are here, all that we're here to bring forth into the world. It's like that cultivates the purpose, right? When we figure out how to actually forgive those hard, sticky places within ourselves, that's when we're able to find more space to show up in
100%
new ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because those, I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with parts work and that, but
I'm not.
So parts work, or IFS, it's also internal family systems. It basically the philosophy behind it is that we are actually these multi-dimensional people with many different characters that are inside of us, and these sort of like trauma events that happen kind of get locked as different inner children at different ages depending on what was going on. So but that is also true for our parents. I noticed when so once my dad passed away, it was like, wait a second, this inner voice of my dad is still alive, and like his archetype is still alive within me, like having this inner dialogue with me. So it's like learning how to, because it's really that inner, that part, like your parents inside of yourself are also sort of like parts of your inner children that need love and acceptance and healing. So if you can show up and give that little boy or girl what he or she needed, that's where the healing happens.
Yes. I have a family member that is currently suffering with an illness. And so I went home and was a caretaker for like a month. And I did it a couple times. And when you go home, you really get these opportunities to be a witness to just maybe things that you're not in front of all the time. It sounds like for you, you moved away, right? You don't live super close to your family. So when you get to get back in the mix of it, you're confronted with these energies from your family members that can feel just confronting at times. And yet when we just like really show up with intention to see them as children, or to see them as just wounded individuals, like just like us, like we are those people. And when we get to see them as mirrors versus someone who's in opposition towards us, we can find so much more grace and space for letting love to live in the midst of that dynamic. And I know for so many of us, that can be really challenging. I think in a lot of healing spaces, there are, there's the conversation of boundaries. And sometimes I know that this is very different for everyone. So this is obviously like me just saying like, this is a case by case basis. Boundaries are always important. And also I think it's important that if we're ready to extend ourselves past maybe what has once felt uncomfortable, to then try to welcome what feels uncomfortable, to let love flow there, that can be really juicy, like really, really juicy.
100%. Yeah.
And it sounds like you've put yourself in that situation to go there.
Yeah, so my grandfather and I were estranged for about 10 years. And I actually, like, after putting in the work and coming to some of these realizations, I reached out and like healed the relationship. And is it perfect? Hell no. It's not perfect. There's still some ways that he shows up that are like super annoying to me, but I see him as a human who's doing his best, who, like, we've had these memories of love and connection together, and he really does care about me, even though some of the ways that he has expressed this, or whatever, in the past haven't been the best. Like, I am able to see that there is that link of caring, and like he's had some super interesting experiences too, in terms of just like growing up in the Great Depression, and like it's just like seeing him as a human, and also kind of like hearing some stories about the trauma that he went through growing up. It just was very humanizing to be like, I went from, and there's this big dramatic sort of thing in the family, and my grandparents divorced, and so that was kind of like the event that like that this all happened. But it was all, it helped me accept a part of myself, to let him back in, and to to heal that relationship, and also to navigate the boundaries, because there's still boundaries that I'm like, you know what, I don't really want to talk about like your relationship with the people who you aren't talking to. It's like, so it's like this this dance of honoring our connection and like still dealing with the stuff that I'm like, I don't really love this part either, but I love him. So yeah.
Totally. I have someone that I'm thinking of that's a family member of mine who I love him tremendously, and we have had a more challenging time than most. And it's that, fortunately for me, he's been willing to have those conversations. And it sounds like for you, your grandfather has also been somewhat willing to have those conversations as well.
Yeah.
And that's not the case for everyone. So I also like want to put that on the table as like, that's something to be grateful for, right? For us to be able to have that flexibility to have those conversations with those people then gets to help us really, just see a different side of them, see a different side of ourselves, and go there.
This is also the beauty of internal family systems to me, is because like if you need to set that boundary with that person, there's still a way that you can heal. Like sometimes in men's work, we will do this thing where it's like, okay, you have this beef with somebody in your family, and you can't necessarily have this conversation that you want to have with them. So let's pick out another man in the group to stand in as the space holder for this energy of your grandfather or whoever it is. And so you're able to say what you need to say from that like little kid hurt place and like get it all out. And then also be like, okay, you know what? Like, where is my part that I'm contributing? Because when it comes down to it, I really like to boil things down to their quintessence, like the simplest aspects. And one helpful filter for me is life happening to me or is life happening for me? Because when I'm starting to complain and be like, oh, and this happened, and then my dog, like got mud all over the couch, or whatever it is, it's like, okay, this is a moment when I'm giving my power away. I'm saying like, I'm the victim and woe is me, and like, this is too bad. And I think where the spirituality piece comes in is realizing that you are actually the conscious creator of your own reality. And so even the things that you don't like, I'm sorry to say, are actually a reflection of how you are showing up. And so can we tap in, be aware of what needs to be fixed? So like hold the energy of our emotions and feel what they're trying to tell us, and then take the action that we need to take to change it. And then it's basically just repeating that every day for the rest of our lives.
Every day and every moment, right? Moment. Sometimes it's a moment by moment basis.
100%, it's 100%.
It's prior to even jumping on, we were talking about how there's this opportunity that we're feeling amidst the collective for hard things to resurface and come back to the forefront of many of our minds, so that we have this opportunity to potentially go a different way or not. And so this is exactly that same, it's of that same essence. It's like, is this for me? Anytime for me, I'm in that same belief that if something is hard and it's here, like it's here for me, it's here for me to learn something. That's even 100%. Something to be grateful for. It's like what you said about losing your father. That's not something that you would hear many people say that they're necessarily grateful for. And yet you learned so much. So you have the foresight to be able to recognize this shaped me into the man that I am today, and I'm grateful for the man that I am today. So thank you. Thank you for this moment in time where I got to learn more about myself and life and spirit and life after death, right? It's
100%.
death.
Yeah. I mean, and that does take a certain openness to be like, because we have this idea of like, okay, how we get ahead is like we focus our resources and like niche down and focus on one thing. And this is like, as somebody in the personal growth or healing space, there's so many different people with so many different approaches, but I've like gone through that approach of like trying to have a niche and doing this very like relationship thing. But it's like what I'm realizing is, and this is kind of back to the collective energy too, is like the way that we move forward with healing on the collective level is everybody shows up in their fullest self-expression.
Yeah. Yep. And that is a process in itself.
Oh,
right?
It sounds much more comfortable and like rosy. It's like, yeah, let's go. But I've been doing the Artist Way with this group in town, and it's been even just like sitting. There's a few different sides to it, but the most consistent part is like the morning pages where you're sitting down with your thoughts, and it's like even that is like has been a wild experience of like, feeling like I'm coming up against these different parts of myself, of like this judge or censor part of myself, and really having to take some uncomfortable steps of trying things out that I'm not not comfortable with, because so with that energy of nervousness, it can actually be utilized as a force of inspiration. So it's like I'm a musician, and the nerves don't go away, no matter if you're performing in front of 5 people or 5,000 people. It's like the nerves don't go away, but the difference between the people who are really great performers is that they have the nervous system capacity to hold that energy of excitement and channel it into connecting with their audience.
You're speaking my language. This is like, it's so funny. I did the Artist Way in 2020, and at the same time, I was really jumping into breath work, but like hard in the paint with breath work. So doing it every day, rebirthing breath work. This wasn't like the wisest choice, I think, but I was doing it.
Yeah.
And I did it for 3 months straight. So I was meeting myself for about an hour a day and breathing with pretty high intensity, and it was really profound. And also my nervous system after the fact was like, what did you do to me?
100%.
It was definitely clearing itself of so much stagnant energy. And there was an integration process that hadn't yet happened. So that took years. That literally took years of finding the new rhythm within my own body to actually feel safe and know what it feels like to regulate my nervous system, because I wasn't living in that place. Like I was fairly manic, I'd say, like just nervous all the time. And I realized that that's a part of, our Neolithic nature. And also it's not necessary to live from that place at all times. And that's kind of where I was living. So it's that in itself is just this, when we get to rewire these patterns for ourselves, specifically in the nervous system, it is that form of expression that we get to call ourselves back to. It's exactly what you're saying. It's like, okay, no, I can be safe, and I'm going to just trust myself, even though this is going to feel scary, and I'm going to breathe through this, and I'm going to trust my body. because I'm going to feel scared sometimes. That's what the nervous system is here for. Like fear is here for a reason. We're meant to feel it. It's not a bad thing. It's just a teacher, right?
100%.
Also love that you're doing the artist way. I'm so excited for you.
It's been a great journey, and just like thinking about the spirituality piece in terms of like that the morning pages and even like our sense of play is a spiritual practice.
Yes.
Because I think just going back to there's kind of like a different stream between this entrepreneur thing and like artist art, like how artists show up, because there's this preserving this sense of wonder and showing up and having it be about the collaboration. And to me, that's so different than just like selling somebody a coaching package or whatever, because the best mentors that I've had, they are my brothers now. It's like, and not in this like weird corporate, like we're family kind of way, but like genuinely, like the things that we go through that are meaningful bond us together. And so like when we work together, like I will start to start to like the people that I'm working with and have feelings of love because we're here together creating something special. That's like, how could you not?
Yes, absolutely. We're here to interconnect. That's what we're really here. One of my favorite Ram Dass quotes is we're here to walk each other home. And it is so true for me that when we're in deep relationship and we have the capability to meet people deeply, even in conversations at the grocery store, like we can go there without even going there. Like you can be kind and just offer some sense of semblance because we are of the same species. So why not? Right? Everything else works together. We should 100%. Too. Well, nature does. Like
back to your integration point, it's like we can we can all fork out some money to go to a transformative weekend or retreat or whatever, but the real practice is like, what is the point if we're not able to integrate that back into changing our habits? Because there is a little bit of this pattern of escapism where it's like, okay, I go into the forest, I do my plant medicine thing, and then I come back and it's just like, but okay, how are you taking those lessons and integrating them into your life instead of like being like, oh, well, this is an escape? Because even like a men's weekend of togetherness, it's like if it's not integrated and connected back, it's like if you're just going, for me, I was going to these weekends and then I like didn't have a strong community here. And I was like, I'm going to all these weekends. I have these brothers from like all over the US now, but I'm like, my community here was like not, I'm like, I don't have the support here like I wanted. So it took a conscious effort of like, okay, maybe I can take some of this energy and confidence and self-expression and, form the connections that that are like on the ground floor in my life. Because I think, relationship with my fiance, my relationship with my daughter, it's like those are the connections that have the most impact. And that's why I'm passionate about this work, is because it helps you show up in a way that's like closer to how you want to. It's not perfect, and there's going to be readjustments that you're going to have to make, and that's part of the healing journey as well. But to have people be able to show up, know who they are, fully express that, and be open and like in a respectful and like collaborative way with other people. I just think changing that on, like, if everybody would just do a little bit more of that, it would change a lot of things. There's this there's this sense that, and I think this is also religious programming, where we
Mm-hmm.
expect for somebody to save us, to be like, here's the
Yes.
solution, or like, we're going to protect you from XYZ. And I think that more and more of us are becoming aware that like the facade of like of what we think is like protecting us is actually sometimes keeping us like more in this prison of the matrix. And like, do we really need one extra program to become healed, or do we need to like be more aware of how we are acting in our relationships? Because there's this, I think with manifestation or affirmations, affirmations, there's this like, I'm all for saying some things in the mirror at the beginning of your day. And what maybe might be more impactful is bringing that awareness to all day long, and the little conversations that you're having with yourself all day, like, and changing that narrative is much trickier and much more impactful practice. But it takes time and it takes consistency. There's no like silver bullet of being like, okay, I'm going to have this one experience and then I'm going to like figure it all out, because we don't ever figure it all out. It's just a matter of showing up and doing our best.
Yes. There isn't a magic pill. And I think that is also just something that society, especially American society, it's like we've been fed this narrative that you can just fix it with medication or, I don't know, something else, right? And it's not a quick fix. Like spirituality is not a quick fix. And I think that, like you mentioned, there is this tendency to find escapism in the midst of trying to access what spirituality means for us. And it is so multifaceted, because we are multifaceted. We are multidimensional human beings with so many nooks and crannies from our past experiences that potentially need to be sat with before we can even do anything else. It's like, and it's not like it needs to all be done at once. Like it's the integration process, because things will continue. I can't tell you how many times I've been like, I've healed this. I've gone through this. And it's like 2 years later, it pops itself back up again to just, rear its head and teach me something new, teach me a new iteration of what it was actually there to teach me. And it's an ever going, ever moving process. And it's for us all the time, each and every time it's for us.
100%. I mean, I love spiral symbols, and just, I feel like it's very much that is a good representation of our growth path, because even as even as I'm like coming doing things and like improving things and stepping into my power, there's these memories that will pop up like almost like clockwork of like things that happened 4 years ago or whatever, where I'll like have this energy that I'm like almost like reliving this past story, and it takes some awareness to even realize, I'm like, is this really representative of my experience right now, or is this like me telling like an old story about myself and who I am?
Yeah. And then just being the witness, right? Being the witness to the thought, being a witness to what's coming up, and rather than judging it, realizing that this is a human experience, and it's important to humanize our experience, because that also gives us the ability to have grace for ourselves. I think so many of us, when we start to practice our spiritual practices and kind of get into the flow of things, we have these expectations for us that tend to be unrealistic. We're not perfect, and we're not meant to be. That takes the fun out of it.
That is part of the healing journey, though, because I think so many of us are in this sort of like self-improvement mindset of like, we need to do X, Y, and Z. And like, I'm gonna cold plunge and like do this it's like very results oriented again,
Yes.
rather than I think what's less comfortable, and I think especially for men, is like taking this time to slow down and be receptive and really open up, because yeah, that's hard to do when you're just like plowing ahead. And even I noticed this pattern in my old men's group of like, we would set goals, we would hit them, and then there was like no sort of like recognition, or like it would just be like on to the next goal. And I'm like, this is very like a metaphor for how we do things. And it's like we need healthier, more sustainable sustenance than just being able to be like, yes, I crushed the like 50 push-ups today. We need to learn how to hold ourselves through the tough times, and like, even if we didn't show up the way that we wanted to be able to learn how to do repair work and with like ourselves and with other people, because I think shame has a way of just locking in the pattern so it gets repeated again. So any way that we can open up and allow for looking at things differently, and allowing for some grace and forgiveness for ourselves, that's where the magic happens.
That's where the magic happens. 1,000%. Yeah, I've found so much more ease in my life allowing what is to be, rather than forcing, and rather than having an expectation. I think it's important to have, a mission in mind, and to have structure, and to be disciplined, and also to, like you said, find the rest amidst all of that, and to be comfortable with what is, rather than forcing what isn't. We'll learn real quick when something isn't for us.
Yeah, spirit has a way of guiding us, sometimes gentle, and then sometimes more rough if we're not picking up the more subtle hints. But I think that's the beauty of practicing this intentionality, is that you are able to sort of humble yourself and be like, you know what, there's something going on here where like the energy isn't quite like right. So I wonder what that's about. And it's really comes down to being curious, rather than having this judgment, like before, my pattern was just like snap judgment. Okay, like, this is more evidence for like why I'm not good enough or whatever. But like being able to be like, no, this is like what I'm feeling. Even like the annoying, bratty parts of myself are perfectly valid. And I think that's been one of the beautiful things about the morning pages. I've leaned into expressing that part, and it's like, okay, if we're going victim mode, we're going to go full victim mode and like get it out of our system and be like, I don't want to do this, and and let it out. And then it feels good because it's like out of my system, and then I can carry on the whole rest of, I can carry on for a while at least, with a different lens, without carrying that weight and having it affect all of the interactions that I have.
The gift of morning pages. It's so funny because I've pretty much continued the practice. I'm doing it now, but since 2020, and I don't even know how many journals, but it's insane. I have like probably close to 15 journals that I've filled. Wow, that's awesome. And it's just been really fun. I know that Julia doesn't recommend reading them again. And also, I think it's a good test of time when it's been a while, right? Like giving it some time. Those things have integrated themselves for the most part. And so going back to them has actually been really impactful for me in my life, to see these prayers that I really put out into the world that have come alive. And so it's also been like this really helpful just vision to see that I set before myself without knowing that I was setting it before myself. You know, it's just these words that you put on pages tend to be just a clearing of sorts and also a prayer of sorts. And it's so beautiful. I'm so stoked for you. I'm probably going to be doing the course again soon. It's a commitment though. Like, you know, it's a full on commitment.
Oh
and
yeah, for sure.
There's a lot that I'm navigating right now, just being pregnant. So I'm like, okay, let's not do exactly what you said and take too much on the plate, you know, just trying to digest one thing at a time. I do have a question for you in regards to working with folks. What for you, because working with people in service is such a form of reciprocity, what do you feel like you have gained through opening yourself up to this work?
I mean, really for me, it feels like stepping into my purpose. And I've always just been one to like really dive deep into whatever I'm doing and like really dig and scrape all the wisdom that I can and then kind of like move on to the next thing. And I feel like I've been collecting all of these things and on my own journey of healing depression and anxiety and all of these things. And I feel like my my gift is to really be able to see others and their gifts. So this sense of like self-expression and being able to listen to who somebody really is and to express and share that, like I feel like that is the energy that is going to change the world.
I couldn't agree more. I absolutely couldn't agree more. That's something that I've realized is a gift of mine as well. And I think it takes time to feel comfortable with that admittance. I don't know if that was the same for you, but you can come from a place of humility when you actually recognize what's being presented to you with actual evidence. And it can be really beautiful when we actually let ourselves receive that wisdom, because it is wisdom. It's
absolutely
confronting wisdom, but it's wisdom nonetheless.
Well, and my wisdom isn't any better than anybody else's too. Like the whole thing of what it's about is coming together so that we can discover what that is in relationship together.
Collaboration, always, always. We're always going to be better together. It's and you've said that word quite a bit, and it's one of my favorite words. It really is, because it's just that's the sweet honey and nectar that we get to experience within this life when we do life with one another.
100%. Yeah, I would say like my mission is to really help men, especially. So there's this idea of vulnerability, because you can't have self-expression without vulnerability. But there's a lot of confusion, especially with men, in terms of like, what is it safe for me to even be vulnerable, you know, like especially to women, or you know, like they have things in the past, and there's this confusion around like, how do I share and be self-expressed and still maintain my like masculinity? And I'm like, no, that's actually a key to being able to show up in wholeness, is to be able to show up. Like, to me, it's a sign of strength that you're able to be like, you know what, I may be a little bit different than some other men. Like, I feel like very intense feelings a lot of the time, and that may not be like everybody's experience, but like we all have wisdom that can only come from our unique experience. So the idea is being in it, getting ourselves together so that we can make it happen. That's really as simple as it is.
Totally. embracing it, right? That's a gift. It's a gift to be a feeler.
100%.
It hurts like hell at times, but
It's
it's a
not the most fun
gift.
always.
It's
Yeah.
not the most fun always. I've been sensitive since I came into the world. It's been since day one. I've always been sensitive. And it's challenging to navigate when you're taught that it's not okay to be sensitive,
100%. Yeah.
but to reclaim it is, and then to be able to collaborate with others and to be a mirror as we embody it for ourselves is really, truly such a gift.
100%. Yeah. There's few things that make me feel more like me when I'm like playing a song, for loved ones that I wrote, or, like just tapping into that
Yes.
self-expression.
Yes. Thank you. So good. Okay. One final question before we roll the final carpet out. If you had one slice of wisdom to share through your own experience of what you've gathered through your life thus far, what would it be?
I mean, I'm just going to share this affirmation that I really enjoy, that I actually use quite often to just like help myself throughout the day with the judgment piece specifically. And that is, and I'm just going to say you, for the listeners, but you are trustworthy, you're a good person, and you are doing your best. And really, like all the other chatter that can happen, that for me cuts through a lot of that and be like, you know what? I'm not going to show up perfectly, but I am going to show up as me. And that is fucking enough.
More than enough. More than enough. Especially because you're meeting yourself in those deep places. So that's so good. Thank you. And how can people find you? How can people work with you?
So right now I'm like mid-launch of
Sweet.
in-person and online men's circles. I also do one-on-one mentorship, and I've also been specifically participating in more ceremonial contexts with my music as well. So
awesome.
Part of my passion is like initiation and reclaiming this sense of ceremony. So I'm happy to facilitate or perform or collaborate something. But in terms of where you can find me, I've got a website, Zac Phillips, ZACPHILLIPS.com, and you can find me on Instagram at I am Zac Phillips. And I'm also putting together a podcast of my own. So I've been interviewing some people, but I don't quite have like a name or anything like that. So that the details of that will be coming out soon.
TBD. All in the works. I love it. Well, thank you so much for your time and for just all that you shared today from such a place of vulnerability. And I know that that's taken work to be where you are today. So thank you for meeting yourself so that you can meet others in the same way. I
am really happy to be able to share, honestly. And thank you for, having these conversations with not only me, but the other guests that you have. And it's just so needed to just have some more heartfelt and like spiritual conversations. So appreciate the chance of coming on and giving people a little taste of my medicine. Of course. Yeah. Thank you for showing up. I appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. Sending you so much love, all the blessings, and have a lovely, lovely rest of your day. Bye.
Hey there, it's Danae again. Just wanted to say thank you for sharing your time and energy with me. If this podcast resonates, please like, subscribe, follow, and share if you're willing. Reviews help too, so if you're feeling the vibe, please leave a review where you can. Sending all the love. Peace.